Hello, everyone. I am Professor Joan Schaffner, and I'm at the George Washington University Law School, and I'm the moderator for our webinar today. I want to welcome and thank you all for attending the second ABA Tips Animal Law Committee Behind the Pages webinar, featuring the authors of our most recent newsletter articles from the summer 2025 issue. The authors will each discuss their articles, covering a variety of animal law topics, and then we will take questions from the audience. I ask that you please post your questions in the Q&A feature, and we will get to as many as we can after each of the presentations are concluded. It is now my pleasure to briefly introduce each of our fabulous panelists today now so that we can then smoothly transition to each speaker once we get going. First up will be Jo Anderson. She's a third-year law student at Indiana University Robert H. McKinney School of Law, who will be presenting her article entitled Resilience and Advocacy, Navigating Law School with a Service Dog. Next to speak is Johnny Lieberman. He's a retired board-certified physician in internal medicine and infectious diseases, and is currently enrolled in the MSL program in animal law at Lewis and Clark Law School. Johnny will present on CAFOs and avian influenza. Is a bird flu pandemic unavoidable? We will then turn to Altamash Syed, founding and managing partner of Environmental and Animal Rights Consultants Pakistan, who will discuss his article entitled Toward Interspecies Justice, Legal and Ethical Transformation in Pakistan. And then we will end with two speakers who will discuss recent events regarding chimpanzees. Bruce Wagman is a full-time animal lawyer with the law firm of Riley Safer Holmes and Kinsella, and he will present on his article entitled Chimpanzees, 10 Years of Endangered Status. And we will then end with Amy Fultz, co-founder, welfare scientist, and director of special projects at Chimp Haven, who will discuss a variety of issues related to the homing of former laboratory primates at Chimp Haven. And without further ado, we will get started. Jo, why don't you take it away?
Hey everyone. Okay, I was told that I couldn't do this without introducing Pippin. Come here, Pip. Come on up. Come here. Come on. There we go. Hey everyone, this is Pippin, who's very happy to meet everyone, as you can see.
Excellent. So glad to meet Pippin. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. So like I said, I am a 3L at McKinney in Indianapolis. And when I started school, I knew I wanted to do agriculture law. My school does not have any animal law or agriculture program. And so I took the first animal related externship or internship that I could find at the Horse Race Commission, and fell absolutely in love with animal law and fell in love with horses. Um, my first service dog, um, next slide, please. Um, my first service dog that I actually started school with was Zeke, picture on the right. It was 11 years old and he started my first year. Pippin ended up tapping in about halfway through my first year, and he's been working full time for about a year now. Um, he is 3 years old. He turned 3 in May, and he's been a whole lot of places at this point. Next slide. So this is just a broad overview. To break it down really simply, service dogs are trained for one person and one person with a disability. They're going to be task trained. An emotional support animal is, they don't necessarily even have to have any training. They are simply for emotional comfort. And a therapy dog is trained, they have training, and they're going to be trained for multiple people. A lot of times you'll see them in hospitals, you'll see them in, we bring them into school during finals, but they're trained for a group of people. Next slide. This is a far larger grasp with all of the laws and everything like that. Um, but again, to big picture this, um, service dogs, the key here is that they have public access. It can be simplified into one statement of anywhere I can go, my service dog can go with me. Um, Honestly, this even extends to restaurants. So he can go into a restaurant with me because I have access, he has access. Uh, Therapy dogs, it is based on facility permission. So they don't have public access rights, but the permission is granted by the facility. Emotional support animals also do not have public access rights, but again, um, their laws are granted under the laws that they have access under are based on their serving a single individual. Next slide, please. So this is a little bit more about what my article is about, some of the challenges that I have faced. Um, Honestly, the biggest challenge that service dog handlers face in America is the service dog registration scam. We in the service dog community honestly really like to joke about this. A lot of people have actually registered jars of Nutella online. You'll be scrolling Facebook, you see it on Google, and it's like register your service dog, and they're scams. Pay $100, get a certification card. You can register anything. You can register your lizard. You can register a jar of Nutella. And all it does in the long run is it makes it harder for legitimate service dog handlers to take their dogs places. And the reason it does that is one person walks in with an ID, and you see that sign at Family Dollar where it says must have papers to show. I walk in and federal law says there's no registry in the US. I don't have to have papers to show. The law says I don't have to. But now somebody walked in with a registration that they paid $100 online for, and now that organization, that business thinks that there are papers. Um, Another thing that's really hard is that there's this idea that service dogs only serve blind people or they only serve people in wheelchairs. Well, that's not true. So Pippin is a medical alert dog. He alerts to my migraines and he alerts to heart rate. And so that's not something you can see or it's not readily visible. And so when I walk in, I'm not blind and people don't necessarily see that off the bat. And so, you know, that's a University of Kentucky sign. And, that's kind of where visible disabilities versus invisible disabilities make this hard. Next slide, please. So balancing Pippin's work and well-being, this is kind of where it gets fun. I have a lot of fun feeding my dogs. My dogs are partial raw fed, so it makes it even more fun. We have a lot of treat bowls. We have a lot of different ways to feed him, and it allows me to provide him a lot of stimulation while he's in class with me. Um, a large part of that is how we maintain his mental well-being while he's working. And, so when he's in class, when he's eating, he's getting different textures, he's getting different um, tastes and stuff like that. And he's able to do that quietly while he's in class. But it also allows him to have to work for his food. It allows him to engage his mind while he's in class with me. And, part of that is he does something for me, but I'm also able to do something for him. Um, Access to the building and access to the law school, it's really interesting because I don't have to request an accommodation for a service dog. Um, Under the ADA, he gets access to the building. That's just same way he would have access to a grocery store, same way he would have access to a restaurant. But one of the things I do request accommodations for is I do have a seating accommodation so that if necessary, if I need to use it, I can make sure that I have the handicap area so that he's on an end cap and not like crammed into a corner. I also make sure that I have an accommodation for breaks so that if something happens and I have to like run out of class, um, you know, I don't get penalized for that. It also allows me a little bit more leeway where if I have to leave him at home and deal with my own medical problems without him. I'm able to do that without having to worry about working him inhumanely or, we're worrying about, I'm able to prioritize his health and my health. Um, Next slide, please. So this has come up a lot recently, and service dog in court. And so there was an article that the ALC actually wrote about bringing a service dog to court, and a couple brought their emotional support animal to court, and the judge did choose to allow it. But this has become more and more prevalent of understanding service dogs, support animals, therapy dogs within the court system. And I think this is where the distinction of, do we understand the difference between emotional support animals, therapy animals, and service animals? Do we all really understand that? And a service dog, for the most part, always has a right to be in court. If you are there as to fight a traffic ticket, you have a right to bring your service dog. If you're there to, you know, uh, I don't know, observe a proceeding, you have a right to bring your service dog. But what's interesting is, as an attorney, you're actually asking for a reasonable accommodation. And that's kind of, Pippin and I have started going to court this last semester as part of our clinic. And we actually did have to approach the judge and the clerks ahead of time and say, hey, I do have a service dog, and just let you know. And we talked to him ahead of time, and it was a reasonable accommodation to bring my dog into the court. The dogs that come in as like therapy dogs, those are the ones that are usually used for testimony. I do know I'm at the end of my time, so I'm gonna actually skip the next slide and then go to the very last one because it's adorable. Pippin has procured his graduation robes and we are ready to graduate. So I'm gonna move it on over to Johnny.
All right, thank you for that, Joe. So my article, as Joan mentioned, was about the brewing potential next pandemic in brewing and factory farms, and has a little bit of enhanced background. I have practiced infectious diseases medicine for over 20 years. As a routine part of my practice, I saw the end result of zoonoses routinely, including many people with COVID-19, cared for many people with swine flu, other viruses directly related to acquisition and brewing from animals, as well as the more typical Salmonella, Campylobacter, E. coli, and outbreaks associated with that. I've spent my career on the back end of that, and so I'm in law school now to learn the workings of the law and how to hopefully make changes to affect it on the front end so that this does not have to hopefully continue to happen and make so many patients ill. Next slide, please. So as a brief introduction, the natural reservoir for bird flu or avian influenza or H5N1 is wild migratory birds. It's been in them for hundreds, if not thousands of years, and it lives in their gastrointestinal tract. It can get transmitted when they fly by or land on farms. As you see here, they can go to poultry. It's been detected in dairy cows, and from there, it's been documented in many other animals as well. But a virus can mutate and get spread to humans. Next slide. And this is what we know of as an example of what it looks like inside a CAFO. And it is the ideal cauldron for brewing a catastrophe. The get big or get out model, which we may be familiar with from Earl Butz in the 70s or so, man, did it work for getting an efficient model of production for turning animals into food. However, there were significant consequences as we're dealing with now. Next slide. I'm sure Mr. Boots or perhaps nobody could have imagined that PPE or personal protective equipment would ever have been required or even suggested for working on a farm. But nonetheless, there it is. This is the per the CDC, uh, something which perhaps should be done ideally to help prevent transmission among farm workers. Next slide. And this is from the CDC, but this is probably more like the reality of what is going on. You have a small number of workers, stressed out, probably poorly paid, not protected very well in general. And yeah, this is probably the norm if, in fact, they do even get the PPE that they need. So far from an ideal system. Next slide. This is a plan announced by the USDA a number of months ago, earlier this year. $1 billion plan of using taxpayer money to fight avian flu, and as you'll see in the title there, to lower egg prices. There's a 5-pronged plan, which the details of which are beyond the scope of my 7 or so minutes remaining. But in theory, it sounds good. They're going to spend money to boost biosecurity, to speed repopulation, including a boost in indemnity payments or reimbursement for the producers when they lose animals, cutting red tape, which sounds good, but may not be for those interested in protecting animals. Innovating protection also sounds really good, including strategies to reduce population and money for vaccine research, and then adjusting trade. Because a lot of the money which producers generate in profit is from exports. Next slide. Not really talked about that I can see for boosting biosecurity really gets to the root cause of the problem, which, as you can see in this picture, is crowding. Animals are kept in super close confinement, as we know, poor airflow, no sunlight, high stress. The innovation and biosecurity prongs, which were mentioned, as best I can tell, do not address any of these measures. Next slide. Whereas a transition to what you see here, which, as we all know, is not by any stretch the norm for the model of raising chickens in this example, but this is biosecurity. This is innovation. How? These animals here, they have sunlight, which has UV radiation, which is known to reduce the infectivity and transmissibility of viruses like bird flu. They have fresh air, which means that there's not concentrations of ammonia from all the poop, and the ammonia is not irritating the lungs, which makes it more easy or makes it simpler to get infected. They're less stressed and documented across species as if you have less stress in an animal, you have better immunity, better ability to deal with infection, and so less transmission. Other critiques of models like this are that birds can, or wild birds can bring in the virus and transmit it. However, there's a plan to get around that as well, as has been done in other countries. If you put up nets, you put up roofing to protect these animals. You could even bring in lasers, which are seen as a threat to migratory birds. That keeps the wild birds away and can also similarly reduce the transmission. Next slide. So solutions for dealing with this. In my article, I broke it down broadly into executive branch and legislative branch options. Working within the USDA, there is the Animal Health Protection Act, which in the act itself, it's actually, it recognizes that the USDA should have the ability and that it's important to have an authority to go in and detect disease outbreaks and pests in animals, because doing so is important to the public health. And so this is authorized. The USDA has this authority to go in and implement these measures when it's seen as a threat to the public health. Hasn't been done yet, but it's on the books. The new USDA plan announced by Secretary Rollins actually would fit in with this. Biosecurity and innovation fit into this model. The authority is there. Will they choose to use it? We'll see. That's rolling out in real time, hopefully. Next slide. How about on the legislative side? So a couple of options here. There's the Pandemic and All Hazards Preparedness Act, which has been reauthorized for a number of years, but expired in December of 2024. And in short, what that act does is it authorizes the Department of Health and Human Services to intervene for threats of biosecurity and health emergencies. That would authorize them if they so saw that there was a disease threat brewing, for example, from within a factory farm, that they should be able to go in and interact to protect the public. And then the other option is the Farm Bill, as has been advocated by Animal Legal Defense Fund and others, shifting Farm Bill subsidies away from the toxic status quo model that we have now into something different to promote something more biosecure, something more in the means of public health protection. That would be another way to do it. And as I'm sure everyone here is aware, the Farm Bill is up to be renewed, I think in a few days actually, but certainly before the end of the year. Next slide. And I think this will keep me on time. Not mentioned in hardly any of what I said, or what is in much of the discussion, is this all falls under the so-called One Health triad. And I haven't seen this talked about much, if at all, with USDA measures. But protecting our animals and the way the animals are treated, especially in terms of disease prevention and disease transmission, has a direct effect on the public health and the health of people, extending beyond the farm workers, the people in the communities nearby, and the public in general, especially if we're talking about the pandemic threat, which, if it's not going to be bird flu, if we keep animals confined like they are in some of the pictures we saw, it's very likely going to be another pandemic at some point soon. And I think I'll end there.
Perfect. Thank you for that. I will do my best to be on time. So this is a different kind of an article that I would like to thank James for helping me develop, which is more about from looking at the animal rights movement from a diversity inclusive perspective, and how things on the other side of the world are changing and evolving. And I'm grateful to this committee itself, for mentoring me and giving me all the tools to apply everything that I've learned here back home in Pakistan. So the topic is titled Interspecies Justice. Basically, what John ended with is just a One Health approach idea transformed into a justice lens. So we can talk about human, animal, and environmental rights in the same conversation. And for countries like Pakistan, where the movement isn't that fully developed, we need everything possible to advocate for a just society. And I think that includes everybody. So, next slide, please. My presentation will cover a few of the things that we have tried to experiment here in Pakistan. I'll start with them now. So next slide, please. Firstly, it is basically our legal advocacy work, and I was very lucky to get a amazing education, including an animal law master's from Lewis and Clark, and mentorship from the committee as well. So as soon as I got home in Pakistan in 2024, we started actually working on legal advocacy, and I founded the first animal law firm in my country. And the theory of change of that law firm and everything we do is advocating for interspecies justice. Next slide, please. And through this legal advocacy work, we offer free animal legal aid across the nation. And we started with something that would help us develop a movement. And for those who don't know, in Pakistan, actually, the biggest issue that's highlighted, not in the way that animals are suffering in that area more, is actually the dogs issue, which is basically shooting them as a government's initiative to reduce their population, which scientifically speaking does not do that. So we basically filed a lot of cases as I got home, actually lost count, but around 15 lawsuits at the High Court, which is kind of our superior court. And we went to the court with the basic argument from a One Health interspecies justice perspective that the only mechanism that would help reduce the population of dogs humanely and at the same time would help reduce rabies, dog bites, and other issues, particularly that, make dogs an unsafe species, would be to humanely reduce their population, which is basically the much commonly researched TNVR method. So in Pakistan, that was really hard to do. So firstly, we won a case in January where the first of its kind policy was developed for my province in Punjab that animal birth control was supposed to happen. Eventually, afterwards, we won two other cases that firstly made it illegal for people to cull dogs, but rather they would have to have a veterinarian on board whenever a dog is being captured. And he would basically decide what you're going to do with the dog. And it will be his ultimate decision whether you have to put him to sleep as well. But that would only happen as a last resort. So we kept on building these different judgments, and we're still working on them because it's an ongoing issue and a movement building. And the problem with the law is that change actually doesn't happen. I mean, at least because rule of law is not that strong here, which might be really weird for all of you to, acknowledge or understand. But when something new is developing, you also have to work on the other side of things as well, which is something we do with our other projects. And through our legal work, we also work on wild animals. We were very successful in saving some CITES listed monkeys from going to a zoo where they would eventually die. We just won that case last week. And we have helped with some relocation of, again, endangered brown bears and sent them to sanctuaries. And right now we are working on two new cases. One of them is a transportation policy for farm animals, live animal transport, which does not exist at this point in Pakistan. And the other one is inclusion of animals in disasters, which is something I'm actively pursuing because we have a flood going on right now, and we really need to have animals also being considered as victims in these disasters. So, and that's how we're developing legal advocacy here in the country. Next slide, please. Uh, to basically further the angle and the movement, we're also focusing on the education side of perspective as well, because as I mentioned, the law is not alone when you're doing this for the first time. So initially we made environmental law as a mandatory course, which did not happen before at every law school in our country. Now we are actively advocating and working with the government to ensure that there's at least one tiny little animal law module in each of those courses. It's going to be a hard battle, but we're almost half there. And ever since I came back home in Pakistan, I've been consistently working at different law schools, teaching animal law, environmental law, and hopefully, actually not hopefully, in January, I'll be teaching the first ever food system policy law course at a law school here in Pakistan. And a course titled animal law, which was really hard to do because I always had to struggle with and use the environmental perspective or something else to bring in the conversation and teach those things. On the grassroots level, we are running a fellowship, which is another very common idea where we're directly working with the students, where courses on animal law may not exist, and we're helping them understand the theory. For example, very basic concepts that we know, for example, welfare and rights and property and everything else, is very new to these students. So through that fellowship, we're trying to build that space. Next slide, please. This is where it gets actually very, very interesting. For those who don't know, Islam is actually part of our constitution here in Pakistan. And given there is a 2 billion Muslim population in the world, there's very limited literature available connecting animal rights to Islam, even though it exists, but we need more. And there's nothing absolutely on veganism and how animal ethics and Islam can be taught together. So here in Pakistan, as you may know, different religions have different leaders. In Islam, it's an imam who runs a masjid like a mosque. We're directly training them on how human, animal, and environment rights are espoused in the religion to advocate for empathy and ethics towards all of them. And to run this program, we had a small run out in Lahore, which is where I live, for 25 imams. And later, these imams delivered these Friday sermons, which are also mandatory. So people of the faith go and listen to them. They have to. And they actually believe that at face value more than the law or more than the judges. So this is where actually our greater grassroots impact is coming. Next slide, please. Then where it actually, kind of encapsulated was this year. We held our first ever International Animal Environment Rights Conference. It was supported by like a lot of international organizations, including Lewis and Clark Law School as well, and where we had over 700 people coming across from Pakistan. It was fully plant-based, a national event. I got a lot of slack for it, but it was totally worth it. We had judges speak at this event as well, including Justice Athar Minullah. I hope you know him. He wrote that Carbon Judgment, which later became the kind of like the Magna Carta of animal rights here in Pakistan. So he was there in person alongside other different judges. And hopefully next year, we're trying to get the president on board as well. So we can advocate for this message in a better way. And we covered every possible aspect of animal rights that we could, from farm animals, disasters, experimentation. But of course, we're developing it. We made a lot of mistakes and it will keep on getting better. Next slide, please. Uh, I already did this. You can do the next slide. And lastly, our uh, another one ahead. Next slide. Sorry for that. Just trying to save time. Lastly, to basically put this knowledge into books, right now we're working with a group of authors who are Muslim vegans from across the world, and we're writing the first book on veganism, animal ethics, and Islam. We already have a book contract, so it will come out in a couple of years. And the other one is a passion project, which is about Global South Vegan Voices, another book that we are currently writing, trying to encapsulate the experiences of people in the Global South, of how did they get connected with animal rights. And next slide, if that's possible, is basically our on-ground work. I'll show you just small glimpses of it, which is basically our nonprofit work where we work on the ground and we work on, for example, this is from the disasters of 2022, where 1/3 of our country was underwater, and for what matters to us, 1.1 million farm animals died as well. We wanted that number to be acknowledged and recognized in whatever we could do. So, next slide. While working for human beings, we also work for the animals. And in addition, we basically develop different kind of models, community models, where we can bring people together to talk about human, animal, and environmental rights. This is one of them, a clean water project. It's carbon neutral because we're not using any electricity. And the water available is for both humans and animals to bring more societal change. So when we pass the law, it actually implements it. And later we redirect the same water to build these beautiful green vegetable gardens, which is basically veganizing the community. I believe I'm at time. I had a lot more pictures, but I can skip them in the best interest of other speakers. So thank you so much for listening to me. I made a mistake of adding too many pictures, so I'm sorry. I think the moderator is going through them.
No, that is fine. Thanks so much, Altamash. It's great to just see the photos as we go through them. And as soon as we get to Bruce's set of slides, Bruce will step in. There we go. Thank you so much. Great job.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to listen to Altamash for a whole bunch more. As you can see, I've worn my chimpanzee tie for today. So since just in honor of Amy and Chimpaven and my article, I'll go back to my face, but the tie is a lot better than my face. So this is behind the pages. So really want to talk a little bit about what's behind the article. You can all read the article, but many of us have been working to get chimpanzees to sanctuary to end chimpanzee biomedical testing for 40 years and really started to get some attention in the 2000s. And as many of you know, in 2015, the Endangered Species Act was changed so that all captive chimpanzees are endangered under the Endangered Species Act. Prior to that, they were not, captive chimpanzees were not protected. This was one of the watershed moments in animal law, I have to say, because we never really expected we'd win that fight. So it was pretty amazing, but then there's a lot of work to be done. Next slide. And so while we ended
while we ended the, this is cool. I didn't do that, but I like it. Uh, I think you skipped the slide though. There you go. While we ended the research, now most of us working for chimps are focused on two things. One is getting them to sanctuaries, and I talk a lot about that in the article and the great work by Humane World for Animals and Animal Protection in New Mexico to do that on the federal side. And then providing long-term care for them in sanctuaries because it takes a long time to take care of a chimp since they live to be 55 to 60 years old in sanctuary. Next slide. So why chimps? I mean, we do focus on all animals. My favorite animal to work on is any animal that's not human, but chimpanzees really are so close to us. We share 95 to 98% of the same DNA. And so we have become close to them, if you will, because of that, but also because they're so close to us, they were used in biomedical research, provided so much benefit to us. And that's one of the reasons that there's been such a big focus on chimpanzees and the welfare of chimpanzees after research, if you will, getting them out, like I said, and getting them to sanctuary because of that close connection. Next slide. And there's just to, since we're here in a legal forum, just to be clear, there's lots of interlocking and interrelated laws that one needs to master if you're going to work in this area, specifically with respect to chimpanzees. So I guess I'd say don't try this at home unless you have taken some time to digest and understand both the interplay and the importance of at least these three laws, because all of them have impacted chimpanzees over the course of the last 40 years, both in and out of research, and also have been so important in moving them to sanctuary. We can go to the next slide. And here I want to sort of sidebar, if you will, because a lot of people don't understand this if you don't work in the chimpanzee field. Chimpanzees are used for research both by the federal government and by private universities and industry. And so the difference there is very important. One is that the Chimp Act, that I'll talk about some more in a minute, only applies to those federal chimpanzees. When chimpanzee research ended in 2015 because of the change in the Endangered Species Act, there were roughly 375 and somewhere between 350 and 400 chimpanzees who were owned by the federal government. They were essentially owned or contracted out by the National Institutes of Health, many of them in Texas, in New Mexico, in Louisiana, in Georgia. And then there were another 350 to 400 in private industry, and also some in the pet trade or as pets in people's homes. The chimpanzees in the private side are not at all protected by the Chimp Act. That act applies only to chimpanzees who were researched on by the federal government. And so there was a need to both work on getting the chimpanzees in the federal sector out, and fortunately they had a wonderful home to go to, which is Amy's going to talk about, and Amy founded, and we all love, which is Chimp Haven in Keithville, Louisiana. But there was also a great need to get the private chimpanzees out. That fortunately has been done to some degree. There are only 6 chimpanzee sanctuaries in America. And to be clear, it's a lot harder to keep a chimpanzee essentially and keep them well than just about any other animal because they're so close to us. In other words, in intelligence, they can figure out how to get out of a locked enclosure. They can climb walls. They can do a lot of things that almost no other animals can. And so it takes a lot more effort to contain them safely and securely so that both they're safe and the public is safe. Moving to this slide in the Chimp Act. So the Chimp Act, again, an incredibly important act, and it demonstrates it demonstrates how we focused on chimpanzees. There's only a few laws, federal laws, that specifically focus on a species. There's the Wild Free Roaming Horse and Burros Act. There's some elephant acts, but chimpanzees got their own law, this Chimp Act. As you can see, it was enacted 25 years ago with some amendments along the way. It designates the national sanctuary system technically, but that system ends up being just Chimp Haven in Keithville. And they have an incredible facility with a very large number of chimpanzees, as you can see. And referring to my article, will be the recipients of the chimpanzees who hopefully are leaving the federal environments where they have been researched on in the past and moving to Chimp Haven. There's been a lot of discussion, dispute, and lawsuits between the animal welfare groups and the holders of those chimpanzees and the National Institutes of Health. So far, we have been successful in demonstrating and arguing that the chimpanzees should be moved to sanctuary. But that takes a lot of work and puts a lot of pressure on Chimp Haven and also has a lot of resistance in the research community. Next slide. On the private side, so remember, just referring again, there's the federal chimps and there's the private chimps. On the private side, the chimpanzees go to roughly 5 or 6 sanctuaries in America. There's Chimpanzee Sanctuary Northwest in Cle Elum, Washington, which has, I think, somewhere close to 30 chimps. There is Save the Chimps in Fort Pierce, Florida, which has over 250 chimps. There's the Center for Great Apes, also in Florida, and a few others. The newest and youngest one, which, full disclosure, I'm affiliated with, is Project Chimps. We're in Blue Ridge, Georgia. We currently have 101 chimpanzees who are retired from biomedical research. All of our chimpanzees come from, and again, pointing out the difference, from a private research facility, that research facility being the New Iberia Research Center, which is part of the University of Louisiana. When the Endangered Species Act changed, NERC, or the New Iberia Research Center, was the largest holder of privately held chimpanzees. We obtained an agreement with them to move their chimpanzees to Project Chimps. Not only are chimpanzees difficult or a challenge to keep, they also are very expensive. Cost estimates these days are $30,000 to $35,000 per chimp per year. Living for 50 years. So we've got 101 there, though. Please visit our website and check us out. All our chimpanzees have Facebook pages, and we celebrate them regularly. And we work together with the other sanctuaries in a group called NAPSA, the North American Primate Sanctuary Alliance. I think my time's about up, and that's it for me. Off to Amy, the real champion of chimpanzees.
Guess it helps if I unmute myself. Thank you, Bruce, for a great introduction to Chimp Haven and for your compliments. And thank you all so much for having me. You can move to the next slide. I'm going to talk a little bit more about Chimp Haven since Bruce did a great job of talking about some of the impacts to Chimp Haven. This is an overview sort of the sanctuary. I will say that back in the early 2000s when I first saw this, it was all forest. And this is what's currently at Chimp Haven. You can see our different forested habitats. We have 300 chimps, and I'll go into that in a little bit more, but you can see our habitats and some different types of areas for different types of chimpanzees throughout the sanctuary. Each of our buildings now has veterinary clinics and enrichment kitchens, and we've been very lucky to have grown immensely over the last 30 years. We were actually incorporated in 1995, and the first 2 chimps arrived at Chimp Haven in 2005. You can go on to the next slide, please. So why does Chimp Haven exist? Captive breeding programs were funded in the 80s that for chimpanzees in research. You see this guy here is Yeltsin, and I actually worked with Yeltsin back in the 90s, and this is Yeltsin today at Chimp Haven. There were hundreds of chimps born back then, and it created a surplus of chimpanzees, which actually resulted in the government imposing a breeding moratorium and saying no more chimpanzees should be bred. Because the anticipated demand for chimpanzees in HIV and AIDS research wasn't realized, they actually turned out not to be a good model for HIV and AIDS research. Next slide, please. So Chimphaven, as I mentioned, was founded in 1995, and because the research was falling off, we were responding sort of to this need for long-term care for chimpanzees that were being retired from biomedical research in the United States. And as Bruce mentioned, these are the federally owned chimpanzees. Our organization was created by primatologists as well as other veterinarians and lots of people who were interested. We had collaborations with a lot of people in order to get Chimphaven going. Next slide, please. So Bruce mentioned some of these impacts on Chimphaven, including the Chimp Act in 2000, which was sort of the biggest thing that impacted Chimphaven, as it provided partial federal funding for our sanctuary. And at that time, it helped to provide money both for construction and the care of the chimpanzees. Now that they provide 75% of the care of the chimpanzees. Now, at this point in time, they no longer pay for any construction. So a lot of the things that you saw on that first overview slide were actually built with private funding. And the big announcement in 2015 also impacted Chimphaven about the end of the use of chimpanzees in biomedical research, as well as the Endangered Species Act that Bruce mentioned. You can go on to the next slide, please. So today, Chimphaven is actually the largest chimpanzee sanctuary in the world. We have retired 549 chimpanzees so far to Chimphaven. I am happy to say that since the time our article was written, the Alamogordo chimpanzees, and Bruce kind of alluded to this with the folks that were fighting to get the chimpanzees that were left at Alamogordo to be retired to Chimphaven. They had arrived at Chimphaven earlier in the spring, and we've actually done a few introductions to get them integrated into our colony. But almost all of our residents were formerly used in biomedical research. We do have a couple former pets at Chimphaven. Our average age is 37, and most people consider chimpanzees to be geriatric after the age of 35. We do have a couple 65-year-old males, and we have large groups. Our smallest group is 2 right now, and those are still some of the Alamogordo chimpanzees that are waiting to be integrated into groups at the sanctuary. Next slide, please. So what's next for Chimphaven? As I mentioned, we're celebrating our 30-year anniversary this year, we're actually celebrating in October. We're working on short and long-term planning. We're doing some additional construction. Again, that's privately funded, and that'll be some housing. Right now, that picture is almost obsolete. They've done a lot of work even in the last couple of weeks, but for the Alamogordo chimpanzees. And we'll be doing introductions this fall with some of those chimps as well. There are additional chimpanzees that are potentially going to become eligible to transfer to Chimphaven, but that we don't know that for sure until we hear from both the Department of Human Health and Services as well as the sending facilities, the research facilities. They contact us to let us know that they have chimpanzees that are eligible for transfer, and then we start working with them on planning. You can go to my next slide, please. I just want to add a thank you to my co-authors for the article, Erica Fleury and Tim Ajax. And I did want to mention, there's been a lot of work done for the chimpanzees. Erica and Tim both have worked significantly in the area with monkeys and the potential for monkey retirement. And right now we don't have any federal laws that impact monkeys. But the Captive Primate Safety Act was introduced into Congress in May of 2025. This is a bill that would effectively eliminate breeding and the movement of monkeys, apes, and lemurs in the United States and prevent primates being kept as pets. Right now, there's no federal law that prevents primates as pets. So I would encourage you all to look into the Captive Primate Safety Act, and if you feel so moved, to support that act as well. Thank you all so much for having me. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you all so much. Wow, what a wonderful lineup of speakers and topics here that we've covered today. I will say we're going to jump into the Q&A here in just a minute, but I do want to just thank our presenters all so much. It's really just so much great work being done in these very disparate areas, and all really important work. Both for, for all animals, right? All of us beings on the planet, whether we're human, non-human, or otherwise. So thank you all so much. I know that currently we have two questions in the Q&A, and I see that Altamush typed up an answer, but for those of us that weren't following or are following the Q&A and the answer, Altamush, I think I'm going to ask if you wouldn't mind, since we don't have a whole lot of questions yet, maybe answering the question in person. Amy had a question that and she said, it sounds like you're doing such amazing things, but she had a question about the monkey. She said, why was the government moving monkeys to the zoo, and why would they die there? And so it might be just nice if you wanted to just mention, or sort of, for the rest of us, what was going on in that regard. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. I'll be as brief as possible. So these monkeys are listed under the second appendix of CITES, and they're actually marmosets and capuchins that came through the illegal wildlife trade from South Africa to Pakistan, and eventually nobody showed up to pick them up because they didn't have any permits. I believe they were brought in for breeding purposes. So initially, on a temporary basis, they were sent to a shelter. There were originally 26, two of them died during travel, and 24 were given to the shelter. Eventually, afterwards, as we all know, because of the insane amount of travel, these monkeys were traumatized, and they're rainforest monkeys indigenous to Brazil. So half of them more died, so there were only 13 left, and there was a conversation happening amongst the government here in Pakistan that we need to move them to another place, which was initially a good idea. But the zoo, they basically chose a zoo which was 1,000 kilometers away from there. They were at the same time. So if the transport wasn't going to kill them, the place was going to kill them, because there was no proper environment or ecosystem available for those animals at that zoo. And we had a complete list of animal mortalities that had taken place. And we have filed multiple cases against that zoo as well. So that's what happened, and we won the case last week. And now we're trying to do is work with the Brazilian embassy if they, budge in, and move these monkeys either back to them or a proper sanctuary where these animals can not just survive, but, be monkeys. So that was kind of the story behind it. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Obviously tying quite well with our last two discussion in terms of retiring chimpanzees, but that's wonderful. Bruce, there's one quick question here. I think it said, has the Chimp Act been codified into USC? Did you want to?
Yeah, yes. I don't know the code section off the top of my head, although I should, but yeah, no, it's been federal law in the USC since 2000.
Right.
Amy, do you know the exact citation?
No, I'm sorry.
It's probably in our article, but
Yeah, I think
it's
it
definitely
is.
been codified. Yes, yes.
Amy has an excuse because she's not a lawyer. I don't have a good excuse for not knowing it, except that there's too much in my head. But yeah, it's probably right in
Yeah,
the
if you Google
article.
around, I think we can find it. But
Yeah.
related to that, Marina asked, the chimps at Chimp Haven come from different sources. She said, do they form their own groups after initial integration? Or do you create those groups for them? I know, Amy, you had mentioned something about the groupings there.
Yeah. We do the introductions there. I'm a former director of behavior. We have a new director of behavior now, but I was responsible for over 350 chimpanzee introductions while I was at Chimp Haven. We do a lot of background work before we do an introduction. I could talk on that topic for a long time, but I'll keep it short. So basically, we sort of decide based on backgrounds and what we're seeing, observations of the chimps, personalities, and ages and wellness, who to put together. And sometimes that works, and sometimes they decide that they would like to be in a different group, and we have to move them.
Yeah, we do the same at Project Chimps. First of all, it's 42 USC 283M as in mother, and it's on footnote 11 of my article. But same thing at Project Chimps, we very carefully select, we work with the originating facility because they know the chimps better than we do. They actually have their behaviors usually come and help out, and it's a very careful and slow introduction. You know, as Amy sort of alluded to, it's not like bringing in a dog to your house and you have two other dogs and you just got to be careful. It's a very slow, like 1 or 2 chimps at a time that you put them in aligning separate cages but close so they can just see each other. Maybe do that for a couple days, and if they're not really upset with each other, then you get them a little closer. Maybe they can touch each other, but they're not in the same cage because, again, chimpanzees, not like most other animals, if they get into a fight, it's not like we can go in and break it up. So it's but we've had nothing but success at Project Chimps, and I know most of the sanctuaries do a great job of the introductions.
Just one more follow-up on that, Bruce, in terms of where are you with respect to the private chimpanzees? I forget how, I mean, are there still a lot out there that obviously need homes in terms of the homing of the private
Yeah,
chimps?
well, again, our original focus, over ambitious, was to get just the new Iberia chimps out in a short period of time, and then between COVID and funding, we've slowed down. You know, we're very careful. Those of us at Project Chimps have been involved with sanctuaries gone bad who didn't take care of their animals, mainly because they didn't have the money. And
Mhm.
again, I cited that $35,000 per chimp per year. So we we have slowed down. So there's another 50 or so at New Iberia, who'd be our first place to go. We hope to get another 35 or so in by within a few years, but again, it's a slow process. It's a
Yeah.
lot easier to get cats, by the way, as you can see.
Yeah, I don't, do not have too much trouble with that either. Um, all right. I don't think there are any other specific sort of questions. I'm double checking here to make sure we haven't missed any substantive questions. I guess one more thing, John, maybe moving to you really quickly. Do you think, as you said, when you said the biosecurity doesn't address any of the issues you discussed, which seemed a little strange, do you think there's any hope for, for addressing any of these problems with the CAFOs and the potential for the zoonotic diseases and bird flu to sort of have another COVID outbreak kind of thing that we have that we just lived through not too long ago?
Yeah, that's a great question. And right now, I don't think so. It's not a pressing issue at the forefront, which what I've observed is that for something for a threat that's not immediately visible, lawmakers typically aren't motivated to act. So will it take the next pandemic to perhaps force lawmakers and maybe the public to put pressure on them to realize, hey, trying to work within this model is not the best way to protect the public? Maybe the model needs to be changed, going against what the powerful agribusiness would otherwise, or the status quo. So right now, I'm doubtful, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to stop talking about it and trying to engage others who are smarter and have been doing this for much longer than I have to see if there is a way to work through it. But from making that one simple change, which you can make an argument for just for animal welfare, it solves all the biosecurity issues, and really mitigates the pandemic risk.
Yeah. Thank you. And Joe, we really enjoyed your presentation and meeting Pippin. And it's great to hear sort of a personal story, right, of someone who is living with a service animal and some of the, the real-time issues that arise with that. So we are out of time. I want to thank you all again so very much. And I just want to say to everyone, thank you so much for attending. And I'm sure we'll continue to have these behind the pages webinars as we move forward. So thank you all again. Bye-bye.